I often find myself in a position of offering gratitude, appreciation to all those venerables, to all those individuals who passed on the suttas of Lord Buddha to us down the centuries, 26 centuries almost. Selflessly passing on these teachings that we oftentimes might take for granted, but that are full of jewels. They're like those flashlights that work with a full set of batteries in them, fully charged, that help us in the dark periods of our lives. If, that is, we heed them, heed their call, we pay attention to them, we try to recall them in our mind, in our hearts. Even if it's one single episode from a single sutta. This is one of the very important reasons why I encourage everyone to constantly be reading and listening to the suttas, exposing oneself to the ideas, to the teachings, to the stories, to the messages that are found in them. So I find myself constantly being grateful, appreciative for their generosity of time, energy, their generosity. And as I was about to sit today with you, I asked the question as to what would be the most appropriate. Excuse me. Excuse me. The most opportune, the most appropriate topic to discuss here. And the feeling and thought of generosity kept coming up. Generosity has a big place, has its very important role within the teachings of the Buddha, in this tradition, in our practice. Yes, we have the three trainings of Sila, Samādhi, Paññā. However, it plays its role in all these three. In fact, it has its own place as the primary of Dhamma, Sila, Samādhi, Paññā, preceding all three in many cases. But instead of seeing it as a separate step, the preliminary step, if you will, it is found, to my understanding, in all three of them. Three of the trainings. It goes hand in hand with the development of the mind, of the development of virtue, with the development of wisdom, discernment. And that's where generosity really takes on a different shape. It really transforms, metamorphosizes into something much grander than mere the giving of something to someone else. I say this because I notice in my own practice over the years, I have seen how generosity, in one form or another, can sometimes take the shape of relieving pressure. Relieving pressure. Taking off the burden, if you will. Taking off the edge, if you will, of the intensity of a certain experience. Maybe, perhaps, a sense of guilt. A sense of, I have to. Simply to quiet down an inner voice, perhaps, inside. Or not to feel guilty. But these are cheap ways. These are unwise ways of practicing generosity. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha talks about 4 instances of offerings in the Book of the Fours. There's one where the act of giving is benefiting only the receiver of the offering. There's another instance where it is only the giver who benefits from the offering. And there's an instance where neither one benefits. And then there's the 4th, where both the giver and the receiver benefit to the utmost of that beautiful act. And when the Buddha elaborates on these 4 different levels of offerings, he again comes back to the Cetana, the intentionality of the individual, whether it's the giver or the receiver, the recipient. So if a person is becoming generous or showing an act, manifesting a gesture of giving, but without having his heart in the right place, if you will, not for the right reasons, not the purity of heart or mind, yet the individual who's receiving it is just completely engulfed in the state of joy, of appreciation. And that's the first one. Another instance is when it is the opposite taking place, meaning the recipient is completely either negligent to consider the act and the meaningfulness of it, the gesture, not having the right mind of receiving this gift from the giver. However, the giver himself or herself is fully there with the intention and the sense of joy, piti, of sharing something that is precious. Therefore, that person is going to be benefiting from the act of the gesture of generosity. And the recipient is only going to get the actual financial benefit. Nothing more. Perhaps not even. And there's instances, obviously, when neither of these individuals, these 2 parties, are right there in the right state of mind. Perhaps it's just compulsion, anger, greed, and delusion that's dominating the scene with both of them. However, the 4th one is the ideal, where both entities, both parties are fully there, engaged. And when we look at this 4th aspect of generosity, we see how the giving, the act of giving, the action of giving, be it in thought, in words, and in physical manifestation of that intention, is another way of taking care of one another. There is that gesture, there is that effort in taking care of the other, or the others around us. That's how I see dana. Leaving the confines of one's own small world and coming outward, away from that pseudo sense of safety, of this sense of individuality, of this is me, this is mine, this is who I am. These are mine. This is my knowledge, this is my wisdom, these are my insights, these are my attainments, etc. I don't want to get infected by divulging too much, by sharing too much. What's in it for me mentality. The individual has let go of those things. So in a sense, generosity is the opposite of clinging, the opposite of wanting to hold on. It's the opposite of upadana, grasping. Because you are sharing something wonderful. But we don't necessarily just share mindlessly. We share mindfully. And the way I understand this is there needs to be the presence of Paññā, discernment, wisdom. That's why I was referring earlier to the 3 trainings, each of which has to be holding hands with dana, with generosity, in every aspect of the training that one goes through in this practice. So wisdom must be there. So it's not mindlessly doing something. And when wisdom is there and mindfulness is there, inevitably, then we're unable to talk about generosity being a mere act of releasing of some pressure, some tension, or the manifestation or the outpouring of some sense of guilt. They can't coexist when wisdom and mindfulness are there. So taking care of one another. I see this especially relevant in today's world, where the past few hundred years of this sense of, or search or quest for this absolutist position of individuality has torn us apart from mattering to each other, hence from taking care of one another. And I take my lesson again from the Buddha himself as the ultimate teacher, selflessly giving, selflessly sharing, selflessly putting up with the level of insanity that he was surrounded by. Putujjana, the uneducated, low-level intelligence with which humanity in general operates. But that's not what he saw as the potential, which is another form of generosity manifested by Lord Buddha in every single one of his suttas, in every single syllable that he ever uttered. So my encouragement is for us to take on some of those aspects, some of those attributes of his through the teachings. Not to become someone else, of course, but to see how we can weave some of those characteristics into our own personalities, individual personalities, yes. To revisit our intentions. Our intention, for example, to sit, to practice generosity, to practice Sila, virtue, morality. Why are we doing that? Why are we practicing bhavana or Samādhi, mental cultivation? Why are we doing that? And this requires a certain level of honesty. A serious level of honesty, in fact. Every single time we sit. Every single time we want to do something for one another. So generosity as a synonym for taking care of one another, where we no longer are isolated from each other in our thoughts, in our words, and in our actions. When we're utilizing generosity along with wisdom, even our words could be a gesture of generosity. The uttering of the saying of words or the not saying of words or keeping silent could be, in both cases, depending on the context, as manifestations of generosity. When we say something that needs to be said, when it is truthful, when it is necessary, when it's beneficial to be said, and it's coming from a good place of Mettā. Even if it's uncomfortable for us to say it or take the time to formulate the words and to become patient despite the outside circumstances, that requires tremendous amount of generosity. And similarly, when we feel that certain words need to be spoken to this or that individual, yet after we've looked at all the other conditions, and we see that it would be wiser, more compassionate, to just keep silent, because it is not the most appropriate time, despite the fact that it is truthful. It needs to be said, but the person would not benefit. Suddenly, the individual bears the choice of saying or not saying, and sometimes it would be necessary for them to enact or manifest that behavior of generosity by keeping quiet. And similarly, obviously, with the actions of the body. Some would be generous, others would be generous by not behaving, by holding back. The word for that is samvara. Abstaining, holding back, which is another form of right effort. So whichever way we try to approach the Dhamma, we see this beautiful linkage with every single principle the Buddha talked about. They are like the web that holds everything together. The connection which is another powerful reason for me to respectfully bow to all the countless individuals who've brought us the suttas, which I find it, for myself at least, my duty to expose myself to them, to listen, to read, to work on them, to retranslate them if need be, and to share it in any way possible. So I would like to share that with you, these thoughts, and open up for any questions and thoughts and critiques or comments you might have. I'm using my phone, so I'm only seeing a portion of you. So if you could, when you have a question, if you could just unmute yourself and just go ahead and speak. Hopefully you won't be jumping in at the same time, but as I only am seeing 3 individuals on my screen other than myself.
Thank you for this really wonderful talk on generosity. I appreciate it very much. It seems to be something that needs to go along with both compassion and metta. I mean, it's almost like a simultaneous thing, seems to me. And I think the whole world system, especially the Western world, of always ranking people, and it's the same in Asia now. From day one, from kindergarten, you need to perform especially well to get admitted, and then all the way, everyone needs to be better than someone else in order to have a good job and so forth. It's really counter to this whole act of generosity. So I was encouraging my students. I say, well, it's COVID time. Instead of doing an individual paper, maybe you guys can do a collaboration, can do a teamwork, and don't worry about the grades. It's not like I'm not going to, but it's really hard because of the system. People talk about the GPA, so everyone, you were saying that when you have something good, a great idea, you don't want to share. And it's the same with writers, right? Everyone wants to get the Nobel Prize, the Pulitzer Prize. So it's really not conducive to this very nice generosity. So I hope that the world has a different, or no reward, but just to know how wonderful and how pleasing it is to share ideas with other people. So I really want to thank you, and something more I can talk to my students that it just be its own reward, the sharing, the giving.
Indeed. I mean, Nobel Prize or Pulitzer Prize or whatever it is, you won't be able to take that with you. But you will take with you the effects of the act of generosity with someone else. That's what the Buddha was referring to, as I understand it, when he talked about our kamma being our only inheritance. Not the Pulitzer Prize or the Oscars that one might have on the shelf. That he might have actually stepped on so many heads and crushed so many people to get to, perhaps. And not benefited in the work that needs to be done within oneself. Because the beauty is gone, the wealth is gone, the house is on foreclosure, perhaps. The person is dead and gone, and all the wealth and the estate that one might have amassed, the wealth, are now being torn apart by his grandkids or her grandkids. So what is the person really taking with them? Is the generosity, the spirit of that generosity, which does not diminish with time. The generosity, or the generous act itself, it also has the quality, almost like a droplet of bleach, a thick drop of bleach dropping into this plate that is greasy, or this, bucket that's full of dirty water, greasy water. All of a sudden you see it just like push everything aside. It creates this purity, this clarity. The generous act, if it's genuinely being done from the heart, has the wonderful impact on the mind of clearing up that extra space that we thought never existed. And oftentimes, as a psychotherapist, even now when I see individuals coming in with so many symptoms, primarily depression, for example, when you dig deep enough, when you look at all the conditional factors, you see that they have shut themselves inward or out of a collective, of caring, of others. Or isolated themselves to only one particular person or even a pet. So many wealthy people in the past, and even today, perhaps leave enormous wealth to their pet dog or cat. I mean, that's how ridiculous it can get, when there are millions of people that they could have benefited. So, maturity, and which I see it as a factor of wisdom, plays a huge part in this. So, any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, another question.
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have sort of a trippy question. I don't know whether it's appropriate. It's about a practice. When I do metta, and I try to direct it toward a person,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not sure whether it ever reached them, or whether I'm just kind of projecting and it just like boomerangs on me. I mean, I feel better, but my purpose is for them to feel better.
Good.
But I'll never know. I mean, it's hard to, like for instance, if you have a senior in a nursing home or something, and then you try to, you can't see them, or you can't even physically touch them even, then I'm trying to direct my metta so that, and of course, I don't know whether it goes through. It's sort of like, I don't know, putting your ballot in the mail, did it actually get delivered? I mean, it's kind of a trippy question. Maybe it's too materialistic, like there should be a consequence. Of course, I feel better, but then, that's sort of a byproduct, and I just don't want to delude myself that, hey, you're just making yourself feel better. It's really like just stuck somewhere. It's not really getting there. So I guess my question is, can the mind actually, without computer or without a virtual tool, can the mind still like go places? Anyway, that's my question.
I love that you generously, Russell, share your inner dialogues with us. We take part in the conversations and these different dialogues, points of view, and thank you for that. And I would refer back to those as the elements that are needed to address your question, meaning the questions that came up from the question itself, like, well, is the person really getting the metta that I'm sending them? Well, hold on, where is this question coming from? Am I trying to ingratiate myself that I am sending them metta? Do I want proof? Well, the question itself is helpful to kind of keep us in the crosshairs of the main intention of why I'm practicing metta. And then you said something very poignant. You mentioned how you feel better. You feel good. Now, another question that I would ask to that would be, am I feeling better because I did what I told myself that I would be doing? So, in other words, I'm no longer going to be feeling guilty that I just stood there or sat there idly doing nothing when that person was in pain. Which is still better than not doing anything. However, in order for metta to truly be experientially impacting, one must feel it within oneself. That is unavoidable. The person who's practicing metta needs to first feel it. That's why it's an experiential, it's a feeling-based practice. So long as you are not, the individual is not faking it, and they're not telling themselves, yes, I'm sending it to them wherever they might be, which can easily flip into one-pointed meditation or concentration practice, again, which is not the metta that I teach. But it's coming from a place where you genuinely want to share this lovely feeling in your heart that you know it's genuine with this other person, other being. That in itself can do wonders, both for you and for the recipient. Now, sometimes students, especially in the beginning, have asked me, well, how can I get proof? I want to see, I know when I first started doing metta, I would just, try to go and see that individual, here and there, just to see if their behavior towards me was different. Which was my sneaky way of testing if my work with metta is working. This was basically, I'm talking about my spiritual friend. But then I saw what I was trying to do. I was looking for evidence in the outside world. The main point of the work, the main evidence is, actually you pointed at it, you hinted at it, you said, I feel good. You said that twice. And that's what I would highly encourage you to really churn, to really fan the flames of. Because it's a very personal practice. But in answer to your other question at the end, tail end of it, yes, it's definitely, it's there. The power of the mind. I've seen it, but I don't. It's not like a blind faith type of thing. It's the personal thing, the experiential part. Each individual needs to experience this because it's a beautiful thing. And I know, having worked with you over the course of time, several years in fact, I've noticed changes. But again, that's my own perspective. What really matters is your understanding of the process that has been unfolding in your mind. And given the questions that you've been asking me over time, I personally have seen the changes again. That is my position. However, when you mentioned how you feel good in the midst of doing it and after, especially after you're done, that is a wonderful piece of evidence, which I highly encourage you to pursue further. Hint, hint.
Okay, well, I do believe in I think I have also seen what they call the butterfly effect, you might be doing something, a very small, insignificant action or thought, but somehow, it's not necessarily immediate, but somehow even on the other side of the world or the other side of, in terms of space and time, something happens. I actually do, I don't know whether this is in terms of physics or science, what you call it. I've just heard the butterfly effect, but I'm not exactly sure where that derives from, that notion.
Well, if I may, if my memory serves me correctly, it was a scientific paper, I believe, that was done either in the 80s, late 80s, maybe 87 or 90s, where a group of scientists, they've not only theorized, but they validated it in different ways, how the butterfly fluttering its wings in the jungles of the Amazon has its impact in the cloud formations, I believe, in the Saskatchewan region of Canada, which is far away, thousands and thousands of miles away. But there's also been, obviously, the I think it was called the double slit quantum mechanics experiment, where the same electrons were shot within a slit, and then it went into two directions. And so it was, I think it was called the entanglement theory, because it was popping in two different places at the same time. And whatever manifestation one part of it was demonstrating, the other was as well. And it was basically, obviously I'm not doing it in any way, shape or form justice with my depiction of it. I used to follow this for many years, but basically the power of the thought of the observer was impacting it directly, the behavior of these subatomic particles. Now, of course, we do not have the necessary equipment to test these on a wider, larger scale, but the evidence is still there for us to pause and see the power of the intentionality of the observer on the material world. And there's plenty of evidence also on what happens in your state of mind when a person, for example, practices Mettā and have gone over that initial hurdle of overcoming any sense of guilt that they've had since childhood, perhaps. And when they penetrate through and are able to feel the Mettā in their heart, I actually almost immediately have seen this happen in so many cases where the facial muscles immediately relaxed. And even with patients, where, from one session to the next, when they present themselves in the next session, all of a sudden, they're smiling widely. Their chest is breathing so calmly and without any pressure. Their relationships have improved. Their work performance has improved. I mean, isn't that like evidence on a physical level as to the work that the Mettā is doing? It's not wishful thinking, but that's one of the reasons why I insist that students spend some time every day, at the very least, 45 minutes, an hour, with frequency, with consistency, in order for them to build, brick by brick, these new levels of being within them. So I hope that addresses your question.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? Yes?
Bhante, thank you. First of all, I just want to say, I won't mention the name of the person who I'm talking about here, but a while ago I was sending some healing work to this person, and within seconds of me starting this healing, I seen a vision of this person. I mean, if that person never wanted, because they are present at this group, but I could see an image of this person and I could feel their Mettā literally like straight away, and it was extremely powerful. So just to chip in with what was that conversation there, like it is definitely tangible, but maybe the person who we're talking about here, who Russell's sending it to, if they're not like that in tune, then they're going to feel it on a level that they're not so aware of, I just wanted to add that as well, but also as well something that maybe you can build on a bit, Bhante, is there's a lot of time in this practice where we can think we're sending Mettā, and actually all we're experiencing is like this an energy that we've almost fell out of like touch with, and at that point in time you can really check in, is this genuine Mettā for that person. Like this radiating to the six directions is most of the time when I check in, if I'm apparently radiating Mettā to the six directions, walking down a road and a person walks past me, nearly every single time the Mettā isn't genuine for them straight away. So there has to be a level of refinement in my experience, and I don't know if you can build on that, Bhante, but because it can become, if you just do a little bit of refining, just check in, it can become much more sincere and much more powerful.
Thank you for that, Chitta. To, as you suggested, to build on that, or add a few layers on that, if I may. Sometimes we have certain attachments with the practice, with whatever it is. But given that we're talking about the Brahma Viharas and specifically on Mettā, without getting into the more advanced practice of aspects of the practice, sometimes we're sending the Mettā as we're walking, as you suggested, but the way the Brahma Viharas work oftentimes is especially if they've reached a certain level of maturity, they're not going to ask your permission to morph into the others. I always call them like members of the same family. Meaning, Mettā, without any permission from you, will suddenly morph into mudita. Suddenly, mudita might actually flow into upekkha. And without you knowing, suddenly they might go back into Mettā or karuna, depending on the necessity. See, if the rain is falling down, it will fill up the different receptacles as are needed. Some, you might have puddles. Now, those definitely will need more water to be filled up. And so long as there's rain falling, it will. And other shapes will the water will take on a different shape in them. If you have a cylindrical object, for example, a bottle, that too will be filled up. So I'm trying to draw some similarities here with the a material world, but this is in the context of you walking down the street and radiating Mettā part, the scenario. So you might be genuinely practicing Mettā, however, the energy, using your terminology, that passed around you all of a sudden might not be needing Mettā. And if you're truly in tune with yourself and the practice is really advanced to a certain level, suddenly the Brahma Viharas will, without trying to be too esoteric, will flow into whatever is necessary, whatever shape is necessary at that moment in time. And all of a sudden, your Mettā might transform itself into mudita, because the person who's just walking out of this office building just got the job that they always wanted. And they are truly exhilarated. But they have no one to share with. They want to hug someone on the street, but they can't, because society will not allow it. However, you're passing with the Brahma Viharas moving in you. Suddenly, Mettā will shape-shift, if you will. So then I would recommend that your position may not be so attached. No, I'm supposed to do only Mettā. When mudita is coming and knocking on your heart and saying, excuse me, it's my turn. So it's very fluid. The practice needs to be fluid, but not from the start. It needs maturity. It needs good, strong, solid foundation for it to get there. And in order for us to identify these different phases of the practice, there must always be the three trainings, specifically the last one, which is Paññā. Wisdom must be there. Because you're working with the most sophisticated piece of machinery called the mind. And it has this knack at fooling you from one life to the next. And you won't even know that you've been fooled, and your whole life is going to be wasted in a sense, if wisdom is not being applied. That's number one. It needs to, and that is the distinguishing factor between the Dhamma and whatever is not it, meaning adhamma. And you have a lot of adhamma within the Dhamma today, unfortunately. So we need to practice extra diligence to make sure that wisdom is present in every aspect of our practice. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions, critiques?
I have a question about the practice this morning. It's related to my earlier difficulty. I was sharing with you about the idea of a spiritual friend. So you said earlier that when we were starting the practice that try to get matter by imagining yourself holding someone, and someone you don't want to let go, holding his hand or her hand. And I find myself wanting more and more these days. Like if I really love someone, I want to be able to let that one go because I feel it's actually make me feel guilty when someone said that, okay, you're the love of my life, but you don't, I cannot, be with you, and that is causing the person sorrow. And I just want that person to let go. And you can love someone without having to cling on someone forever. So I just feel that how is that you're asking us to cling to a loved one is not a kind of clinging, because I have a hard time doing that. I just feel now when I love someone, I actually feel very happy if they find, for instance, another person they love, and don't rank it more than me, less than me, doesn't matter. But the fact that why is loving more people less good than having this one person that you attach everything? So I just want to, so it's a real difficulty for me. I'm not trying to be facetious. So it's actually hard for me to think of.
Oh, thank you for that. The only reason why I mentioned imagine that Mettā, the object of your practice, presuming that it is Mettā, is sitting next to you. And the context that I was using that image for was simply to help the practitioner not to doze off, not to fall victim to drowsiness, not to fall victim to torpor or lack of interest. That's where it comes from. When the person starts dozing off, for example, we've lost interest in the meditation object, basically. Now, the image that I use for a loved one sitting right next to us is simply trying to inculcate this sense of, well, if this person is that meaningful to me, I will not take their presence here for granted, even for a millisecond. They're so precious for me. Every millisecond is so important for me that they're here. Now, if we can have that attitude towards the meditation object of Mettā, or whatever it is, now the mind has no option other than to stay here, to stick right here, and not move, not budge. So there is this fervency, this longing to not let any moment from that precious experience be slipped away. That is the intention behind the image that I used. Now, as far as letting go of or not, I didn't. By the way, I didn't use the word clinging earlier in that image, but when we do cling, it's a problem. Anything we cling to, it's a problem. That's what we see from the Buddha. You cling, you're in a big, mess. And when he was talking about the the fire sermon, Aditya Pariyaya Sutta, where he was addressing the three Kassapa brothers in the hill of Gayasissa in India. And these were fire worshipping cults in those days. The older brother, the mid brother, and then the younger brother. Collectively, basically, there were 1,000 of them, 1,000, and they had let go of their previous practice because of what they saw within the body, within the behavior of the Buddha and the teaching, that they put on the robes. They became bhikkhus. So he had surrounded himself at this hilltop. There's a beautiful boulder there. I've been there. It's a wonderful, powerful place. I highly recommend being there. And he gave them the fire sermon. And he said, everything is burning. He used the image of fire, using the image that they had spent decades probably perfecting their own concentrative skills and practices. And now they understood the similarity of clinging to fire, the fire. But the Buddha used the image of clinging, not just clinging, but using the 6 sense bases. He said the eyes are burning, the ears are burning, the mouth, the nose, the body, the mind. They're all burning. With what? With the desire for more. Clinging for more. And the thing that really gets me every single time about this sutta is, even before he ended giving this discourse, all 1,000 became arahants, simply from listening to Lord Buddha. Wow. This does happen. Now, the crucial part that I want to relate here also is in relation to the clinging part. So long as there's an appreciation for the love that you're feeling, but you also are practicing within yourself that I can actually hold this, I can really drink from this spring of fresh water without trying to grasp, without trying to cling. At which point I will not even be able to hold a single droplet of water to drink. But the only way I can do that is if I can leave it open, cupping, and just gently scooping up a little bit of water, and I have a whole mouthful of fresh water with which I can quench my thirst. Now we need that water to survive. We need love. We need companionship. Of course, most of us do. But we go about it the wrong way. We like to hold on, thinking that we will lose because of this thing called impermanence and suffering. Well, either way, they're going to go. Might as well sit next to them, enjoy, and not having them feel guilty that they have to stick right here. Otherwise, I will stop loving them. Get it? That very sneaky way of, I'll give you love only if you fulfill my demands. Now that is real clinging territory where suffering exists. There is no generosity there at all. It's all about me, mine, myself. What's in it for me? And that has nothing to do with the Dhamma. That has nothing to do with true generosity. Because it lacks all the Brahma Viharas. Mettā doesn't even exist there. Love, there's no love there. So I hope that kind of weaves nicely with... Any other thoughts, questions? Comments? I can't see all of you. So, oh yes, Upatissa.
Thanks very much for the talk on Dana and Mettā today. And well, I just like to say that having read 152 suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, I actually counted at least 76 or 50% of the suttas that begin with thus have I heard the Blessed One was dwelling in Jetavana Anathapindika. And, well, I mean, so it seems to me that, without the selfless generosity of countless number of lay disciples during the time of the Buddha, in particular Anathapindika, Visakha, even King Bimbisara, King Pasenadi, and people like that. I mean, the very fact is that we probably won't be receiving the Dhamma today.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. True. I mean, everyone pays special respect to Venerable Ananda, to whom we owe the phrase Evam me sutam, which means that what you just referred to as thus have I heard. And that's Venerable Ananda in the first council. He's giving his eyewitness account, either directly where he was when the Buddha spoke to a crowd, or when the Buddha himself recounted it to him, because that was one of the conditions with which Venerable Ananda assured that he would become his attendant for 25 years. So, but as far as the lay people, absolutely, because even in this modern age, today, there are many resources on the suttas, for example, including the Dhamma talks, including the actual digital formats of different monastics who have translated or are translating, including the actual hard copy books that you buy, the people who've printed it, the people who have put it on the shelves where we go and pick them up, people who are running the websites, paying for those websites for these venerables, whether it's the Mettā monastery with Ajahn Thanissaro or the other monastics. There's a lot of lay people too. So when we pay when we are being appreciative, it's not just the monastics. Yes, the monastics have been responsible to get them through the ages to us, to this 20th century, or even the late 19th century, to be fair. And today's the 21st century. There's so many individuals involved. And so we must be thankful, but it shouldn't stop there, in my opinion. The Dhamma is not on the websites. The Dhamma is not in the series of talks that I personally, or the translations that I put up on the web. They're not there. That's not the Dhamma. The Dhamma has to manifest in us, in the heart, in the mind. You might listen to a wonderful talk by, let's say, Bhante Gunaratana, Bhante Ji. Fine. How much of that are you carrying with you? How much of the talk on the fire sermon is within the heart? When we are in the midst of it, in the midst of the fire of clinging, of these sense doors attacking us, did we lose it, or did we put it on the shelf and said, yes, I'll come to the fire sermon after this fire is over? Because many of times we that's what we do. But we miss the whole boat, because the real Dhamma and the kileshas and the defilements are within the heart, within the mind of the individual. They're not outside of us. So the best way to show appreciation, to my understanding, show appreciation to the Dhamma, is through living it, through breathing life into them. That's the only way, I think, that we can truly taste the maximum that the suttas could offer us. Otherwise, it's just lip service. Otherwise, it's just like these certificates or licenses and things that we have on the wall sometimes that are meaningless, really, when real life experience comes in. Because the Dhamma, like love, like life, is all experiential. Like Mettā, obviously. It's experiential. It needs to be lived. Otherwise, it's lifeless. It's just a set of words that people have memorized. So, thank you for that comment on the importance of Visakha and King Bimbisara, and of course, I keep, it slips through my tongue as Venerable Anathapindika, but he wasn't. But to me, is truly. I mean, he was a noble disciple. He still is a noble disciple in the heavenly realms, of course. And we owe so much. When I was in Savatthi and at the Anathapindika Park, walking on the green grass, I kept looking around and I'm like, wow, all this area was covered in gold coins. Wow. He emptied his whole treasure house to cover it up in the gold that he had in his treasures. Because that was the price that he had set with Prince Jeta. And he bought it to give it to the Buddha and his monks, and they built a monastery there. And that's another place that I highly, highly recommend for us to go, for people to go. It's a powerful, powerful place. Thank you for the mention of how many suttas we have thanks to him. So I appreciate that. Any other thoughts, questions? I can't see hands if you're raising your hand, by the way. Just go ahead and unmute and speak, please. Well, I guess at this point we can, no hands, no sounds, so we'll do some sharing of merits, and yeah, we'll conclude then. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired, for the achievement of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Be well. Please stay safe. Sanitize. Take good care of yourselves, and especially sanitize your mind and your hearts. Not just daily, moment to moment. Remember, in the, I think it's the sutta number 91, Brahmāya Sutta, yes, 91 of Majjhima Nikāya, where the young Brahmin spent several months, I think 7 months or so, with Lord Buddha to test. And he was on a mission by his teacher, who was 101 or 103 years old, because they had heard the Buddha has all the 32 marks of a great man, Sappurisa. And we have the tremendous record of the Buddha's rather mundane behavioral aspects or characteristics, and one thing that, among so many, but one that really comes to mind is he always knew how to move in space, meaning how he would step forward. And in the sutta we hear this young Brahmin mentioning how he would always step forward with his right foot. So I wish that all of us are mindful when we're stepping forward. It really doesn't matter if it's the left or the right, so long as the mind is there, it's in the right place. So I wish all of us to have that constant position of the mind, to be there as we move in space from room to room, to hold that with us. So please stay well, and may those smile never leave your hearts and your faces. See you next time. Be well.